Climate change is one of the most fundamental and adversely impactful challenges ever to confront humanity, and its effects may intensify exponentially over time if nothing is done. Decisively dealing now with climate change is key to ensuring sustainable development, eradicating poverty, and safeguarding economic growth. But before we go into that, let's first define. Climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns. These shifts may be natural, but since the 1800s, human activities have been their main driver. Human activities produce greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane that blanket the earth, trapping the sun's heat and raising temperatures. They can come from deforestation, landfills, and fossil fuels for driving cars or heating buildings. Greenhouse concentrations are at their highest levels in 2 million years, and emissions continue to rise. As a result, the Earth is now 1.1 degrees Celsius warmer than it was in the late 1800s. In the last decade, the warmest on record. Many people think climate change mainly means warmer temperatures, but it is only the beginning of the story. The consequences of climate change now include, among others, intense droughts, water scarcity, severe fires, rising sea levels, flooding, melting polar ice, catastrophic storms, and declining biodiversity. The Philippines is one of the most disaster-prone countries in the world, ranked third on the World Risk Index for highest disaster risk and exposure to natural disasters. Climate change has had and will continue to have drastic effects on the country's climate. Hence, the country is consistently at risk from increasingly severe natural hazards. To name some examples, the Philippines saw an increase in its average temperature by 0.65 degrees Celsius from 1951 to 2010, and a 0.6 to 1 degree Celsius increase in sea surface temperature since 1910, and a 0.09 degrees Celsius increase in ocean temperature since 1950. With fewer recorded cold nights and more hot days. The Philippines has seen 0.15 meters of sea level rise since 1940, threatening to drown the four cities most vulnerable to flooding, namely San Jose, Rojas, Cotabato, and Manila. The Philippines sees an average of 22 typhoons enter its area of responsibility annually, of which 7 to 9 actually make landfall and 6 to 7 cause significant damage. Moreover, since the 1970s, the number of typhoons during the El Niño season has increased. Some examples include the super typhoons Yolanda in 2013, Raleigh and Ulysses in 2020, and Odette in 2021. So, what has the Philippine government done about climate change? In 2009, Republic Act numbered 9729, or the Climate Change Act, was enacted into law. This law mandates the government into considering climate change in its policy making and planning. In accordance with Executive Order 24 Series of 2017, the Cabinet Cluster on Climate Change Adaptation and Mitigation and Disaster Risk Reduction was formed to facilitate coordination among national government agencies, the local government units, and other stakeholders on climate change adaptation and mitigation measures. To lessen the climate crisis impact, the government and we as individuals can do the following on a smaller yet systemic scale. Change our diets to eat less meat and dairy products, or try plant-based meat. To help reduce power consumption and make energy more sustainable, cheaper, or cleaner, let's replace incandescent bulbs with LEDs. Improving public transport may be an option in more developed countries, but the Philippines' infrastructure is not necessarily scalable in that way. Let's avoid making more waste by refraining from buying and consuming too much, especially with single-use items. But individual actions can only do so much. Thus, voting for the right officials who are driven to implement systemic change and urging them to act on these changes will be a significant start in taking the right direction in solving the climate crisis.